Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Utica Sessions. Today we're still discussing the topic of how to explore the Bible for yourself. And today we're going to be talking about the different Bible versions. So, the different Bible versions. Often over the years I have been asked by different people, what's the best Bible version? Which one should I choose? Which one should I buy? Which Bible version should I use? And I always used to answer in different ways. I said, it depends on what you're really looking for. Are you looking more for accuracy in translation? You want to stick to the words, the exact words, word for word kind of thing? Or are you looking for more something readability, accuracy and readability? See, there's a spectrum of the different versions of the English translation of the Bible, ranging from accuracy all the way to readability. Now, it used to be that you would walk into a bookstore and you'd be confronted with a wall of Bibles, shelves and shelves full of Bibles with all these different versions of the English translation. And you're overwhelmed. Which one is the best? Which one do I need? Which one can I read better than another? And getting help from the bookstore personnel, figuring it out. But nowadays, we live in a time where just go online, download a Bible app, because on many of these apps and the online Bibles, you've got dozens of English versions right there at your fingertips. So you've got them free. Most of these apps are free. So you can compare them and look at them. And you don't have to fret and worry about buying the wrong one, buying one that's not going to really work for you. So let's talk about this spectrum of translation. There's a spectrum of translation that ranges from accuracy all the way to readability. Translators who have taken the original languages of Hebrew and Greek and translated those languages into the receptor or receiving or target language, English, Spanish, German, whatever the language may be, they are looking for either accuracy or more toward readability. So the spectrum on one end of the accuracy, start with the accuracy end of the spectrum, that would be called formal equivalence or word for word translation. And that just kind of makes sense. You would think, well, isn't that what we're supposed to do anyway? Don't we take the original words of the original language and translate them into the target language? You know, just take the words of Greek and put them into the Greek words of English. Well, it's not such a simple process, actually, because in various languages around the world, and Greek and Hebrew are certainly no exceptions to this, but there are some words in one language that just do not translate well at all into a target language. In fact, there are some languages that do not have specific words in the receiving language or the target language. There's just no word that exists to express that idea. So it can be a challenge, and the translators have to do some workarounds to get that idea across. So word for word translations can also sometimes read a little awkwardly, and that's because the translators have tried to stay true to the word order and the sentence structure of the original language. They want to preserve accuracy. That's their goal. So they're going to stick with the word order, the syntax, and the sentence structure, translating it into the receiving language. And sometimes it's just going to read kind of funny. It's just not going to not sound quite right. Can be a little clunky at times, but you know, if you can look past that, then that's fine. Not a big problem. Formal equivalence translations are great if you're looking for accuracy. So they're definitely worth using. You need to use those. But in the middle of this spectrum, you know, we start with the word for word, the accuracy. We move a little more toward the middle. In the middle of it is what's called dynamic equivalency. Dynamic equivalency. This is not word for word translation, but it's idea for idea translation. You're taking the idea that is being expressed in the original language and translating that into an idea in the target language. So it's not always word for word, but it's idea for idea. It resembles the style of the target language and reads more naturally. It just feels a little more comfortable as you're reading it, and it fits with your ears a little better. You can understand it much better sometimes. It's certainly not as awkward as a more word-for-word translation. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, and we're going all the way to the end of it, the extreme, is what's called a paraphrase. So we have formal equivalency, we have dynamic equivalency, now we have the paraphrase. So a paraphrase is just simply putting into your own words. A paraphrase is not a translation at all. It's not using the original languages to come up with a new translation. It's not translating at all, like I say. It's simply a rephrasing of a translation into the editor's or the author's own words. So the paraphrase is not really a reliable version of the Bible to use for study. If you're going to do deep study, you don't want to just use a paraphrase. A paraphrase can, though, a good paraphrase can shed some light and express in a very unique way a passage of Scripture that you're looking at. So now I want us to look at a few of the versions, just some examples, and I'll share an example from Scripture to show you how they compare and contrast. So let's look at that. All right, the first example, and we're going to the formal equivalency end of the spectrum, the accuracy, the word for word. A version that is very commonly used, one that I love to use, is the ESV, the English Standard Version translation of Scripture. And it is a formal equivalence. It's a word for word. Now, an example of that from John 1:14. Listen to how it's worded here. The ESV says, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us." All right, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. A familiar passage to believers. So that's the way that the ESV words it. It's very easily understandable, I believe. As we move a little further down the spectrum, we come to the dynamic equivalency side of it. And a perfect example of that one is the NIV, the New International Version. It's a dynamic equivalence, an idea for idea version of the English translation. Here's John 1:14 in the NIV. "The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us." You say that sounds the same, but it's really not. Let me read the ESV once again. "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us." NIV. "The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us." See, there is a slight difference there. ESV says dwelt among us, which is just a statement of condition. He lived among us. The NIV gives a little bit of a purpose to that expression. The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us. That describes intent, that describes purpose. He came for that intention, to establish His dwelling among us. So that just shows a little difference. Now, as we move further down the spectrum, we have a translation. It's called the New Living Translation, the NLT, and it's actually a formal dynamic mix. It takes those two and puts them together, mixes them together. And the way that the NLT says John 1:14 is this: "So the Word became human and made His home among us." You read that, you think you're reading from a newspaper or a blog post or something like, you know, it's the way you would express it, the way that you would say it. The Word became human and made His home among us. So that expresses it in a very up-to-date kind of way, very readable. Now, an example of a paraphrase. There's one by Eugene Peterson that's out there, and it's called The Message. The Message is a paraphrase. And again, it's not a translation at all, but it's the author or the editor is putting into their own words a particular English translation. So The Message is a reputable paraphrase. It's one that I use very often. I enjoy reading it. And it says, John 1:14 like this: "The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood." Now that's putting it street level, isn't it? I mean, that's expressing it in the most common, just regular everyday kind of vernacular that a lot of people use. The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. Now, when I first read that, John 1:14 in the Message, I thought, man, that makes sense, because I can visualize that. I can see Jesus moving into the neighborhood next door. And that is the picture, of the incarnation of Jesus coming to dwell among us, of God coming in the person of Jesus, setting up His home in a human body, living with us. He came and moved into the neighborhood. So I love the way it does it. But those are just some good examples of this spectrum of translation, going from the formal equivalency, the word for word, to the dynamic equivalent, idea for idea. And then there's a mix of those two things. And then we go all the way to the other end, the paraphrase. So, how do you choose your version? Well, one thing you need to think about in choosing the version of the Bible that you want to use, or that you're going to use, is what's your purpose? Is it purely for devotional reading? Is it going to be for that? Is it going to be for daily reading? Are you going to do your read through the Bible with this? Or are you going to go deeper? You're going to do some deeper study. Is that your purpose? So determining what your purpose is for the use of this particular version of the English translation will help to determine which one you should use. Preference. Preference is a big thing. Which one do you prefer? Which one do you like? Which one reads more clearly to you? Which one do you prefer to use? It's up to you. Are you more concerned about accuracy or readability? Just some things to consider. So I hope this has been helpful for you, looking at the various English versions of the Bible. I'm not going to give personal recommendations. I have my favorites, of course. But you're able to download some of these apps. You're able to go online and look at some Bibles online and compare them for yourself. But the ones that I mentioned today in this session are very reputable ones, very useful ones, and very good ones. And I encourage you, on your own, take a look. And hey, we'll be getting back together again for another session. Look forward to that. In the meantime, get into the Word, stay into the Word. And this has been the Utica Sessions. And we don't want to put you to sleep, but we do want to awaken the passion for all things gospel within you. Blessings.